Hey everybody. This is Ian McHenry from Beyond Pricing, bringing you this week in Airbnb and beyond. This is week 9. We took a bit of a hiatus. It's good to be back, and we have a couple of awesome guests today here to talk about the latest news, a lot of developments. We won't rehash the last 6 months, but we'll get you caught up on some really interesting topics. We have Alex from Get Properly app, and we have Stefan from Orbirental. They're here to lend their perspective today, and so we're really glad to have both you guys here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll start out this week. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of regulatory, but we have two sort of experts here in, what we should say is kind of the API economy, shall we say. They're really have both built amazing apps that are very open, and they're all about the interconnectedness of everything. One of the kind of major topics and one of the new developments, especially with Airbnb, has been this idea that different systems should be able to talk to each other. And so Airbnb, what was it now? Maybe a year ago or so, first opened up their API so that you wouldn't just have to log into the Airbnb extranet and manage all your listings. And they started connecting to, I think there were 4 launch partners, LiveRes, Kigo, BookingPal, and LeisureLink, so that property managers could easily get their inventory onto Airbnb. And this was really sort of the first time they ever opened that up. Then in November, they launched this idea of host assist. Is that right, Alex? Is that about when it was?
Yep, it was in November.
Yep. And this was an idea of, okay, not only do we want these channels to be able to, or these management systems to be able to sync information directly with Airbnb and open up the market to a lot more of these traditional property managers, but we also want all these other kind of ancillary services to be able to talk to Airbnb and get information in and out and all that sort of stuff. And so Properly is an official kind of, are you official host assist in most countries, API integrated. Were you part of the November launch, Alex, or a little bit later?
No, we were part of the November launch. We are integrated across the world with Airbnb, so we've got API access for the entire world, and we are currently being promoted through the Host Assist directory in 8 different countries.
Awesome. And if you guys don't know about Host Assist, if you're on Airbnb, where can you actually find Host Assist?
So it really depends where in the world you are. If you are in a country where that partner is being promoted, then you just go to it's pretty much the center of your console on the host side of Airbnb, and you'll see a button there called Host Assist, and you click on that and you'll see the partners that are available for that country. First, you'll have to select the listing you want to look at because it sorts listings by country.
Great. And there's a lot of kind of lock partners there, I think, were the first ones. Lockatron, is that actually August. Shipping? Does somebody have that? August and whatnot there. And the idea, right, was that for them, every time you get a reservation, you want to be able to send a code automatically. Do you have an idea of like how? I haven't seen the integration actually work. How does that work? And why do you think Airbnb kind of started with one with locks, and then 2, I think you're probably pretty unique, and maybe talk to them about why they decided to do that with you guys.
Yeah, I think the idea that Airbnb had at the time was to have an ecosystem of companies that sort of are around Airbnb, that are in spaces that don't directly compete with Airbnb, that are highly complementary to Airbnb. And I think they narrowed it down to 2 areas. One of them access, and then we're the odd man out on the cleaning side. I think the idea on how it works on the access side, I'm a user of August. As a host, I'm a user of August, the smart lock. So I've experienced that a little bit myself. The idea is that every time you have a booking and you have a group of guests arriving, you want to send them your August key. Yep. And this basically automates it because you can connect your August lock to Airbnb. Yep. And it then will automatically send an electronic lock to the person who's actually made the booking.
Got it. And so does it send that information from Airbnb to the August portal, and then the August portal sends out the key automatically?
That's right.
So it's basically pretty much a reservation feed that goes into August.
I think the way it works is the implementation is a little bit I actually should be careful on how I phrase it. It's early days.
Yeah.
But what it does is I believe there's an email that goes out from Airbnb or from August, from one of the two, to the guests saying, hey, here's a lock, click on this link and install the app. And then you get the lock. It's a little bit complicated because on the host side, you actually don't necessarily see whether the guest received the lock or not.
Right.
Second thing is, my primary use case for that is that it's typically when I have multiple people checking in, I want all of them to have a lock, and that part doesn't work yet because it's only the probably who actually made the reservation.
To that. Yeah, and that'll maybe change. Airbnb just launched something where you can add guests to reservations, right?
Exactly.
So presumably along with that will come the integration.
That's glad that you mentioned it, because I think that's exactly the direction
Yeah.
that it's heading. What we do is we are an app that actually allows you to manage your cleaners. So we're not a cleaning service, and I think that's part of the reason why we got admitted into the program, because we're not a cleaning service, we're software.
Right.
And what we do is we allow hosts to build visual checklists, taking the Airbnb listing photos, and then taking a live feed of their bookings, and taking a booking as a trigger to send a cleaning job to a cleaner.
Right.
The cleaner that you'd send your job to would be a cleaner that you're currently working with. But the real service that we're providing is sort of what we think of as the next generation of an API or of interconnectivity. Is we then taking those cleaners and are building a global marketplace of hospitality cleaning services that's available to all Airbnb hosts. So like all we need is a few hosts in every city to send jobs to a few of their cleaners, and those cleaners then become available to everyone. So you have hospitality trained, tried and proven hosts, cleaners in every city of the world.
Yeah.
We've got 2,700 signed up users so far, 400 property managers,
awesome.
And about 700 cleaners.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then what's interesting about that too, especially for me, I have a property in Santa Cruz. We have one cleaner. We manage them, but I think it solves like a lot of problems. One is sort of, when they can't make it, you need backup cleaners. And even just finding that initial person is really difficult, right? And so you already have this network of people that go in there. And it's a really interesting solution. Airbnb tried this through partnerships with Handy and Homejoy, rest in peace, and the whole sort of partnership, rest in peace. I guess that was probably one of the first closed API integrations, really, right? Because presumably it's sending information back and forth between
That's
us
exactly
right. There's always this idea of, Airbnb seems to be executing really, really well, and they're starting to sort of expand what they do. But like you said, there are certain things where they sort of said, hey, we're not going to do that, right? They're not going to build hardware like locks. The cleaning side, it's interesting. They gave that a kind of a go. I mean, they weren't actually deploying their own cleaners. But it's interesting to see them sort of partnering with you properly. Where do you think Airbnb's head is in on that? One thing to talk about here too, and I know this will bring Stefan in a little bit, is Airbnb is very Airbnb centric often, but they're starting to recognize part of this API thing is recognize not everyone lives in Airbnb. Some people now more and more are on multiple platforms, and it seems like there's certain things where they recognize that, well, it might be nice to be able to just automatically book a cleaner through Airbnb. That's really what happens when you get a HomeAway guest. And so, do you think part of that opening up the API, especially the lock thing, is just a way to recognize that it's not all about them, or do you think this is just a way to sort of try to keep people on the Airbnb platform and live their whole life there and not go over to HomeAway?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think on the one hand side, like you mentioned the partnership with Handy before, and I obviously don't know any of the details behind it, but what I would imagine is Airbnb operates in 39,000 cities around the world. So how do you scalably create cleaner supply across 39,000 cities when Handy is in 15 cities? Or any other cleaning company that they could partner with would be in a handful of cities. So I think the reason why they did the partnership with us is because we provide a scalable solution to the problem. We've just launched and we've got cleaners in 400 cities across actually 30-something countries now.
Yeah.
So it's scalable from that perspective.
Yeah.
Now the second part, we are also integrated with HomeAway, and we'll start getting promoted through HomeAway quite aggressively through their partner directory.
Right.
So ultimately a cleaner is a cleaner. So the cleaner doesn't care whether that booking happens on Airbnb or VRBO, HomeAway, or stays in Australia, or book a batch in New Zealand, or Canada stays.
Yeah.
Like for them, it's a cleaning. So the more cleaners you can aggregate, I think it helps. Like sort of having this layer of services available that helps everyone from vacation rentals to home sharing is really a benefit to the industry and reduces friction for hosts.
Right.
So I think that's probably the reason why they've opened up this segment.
Yeah. I think also it's a good strategy in general for a software company to just open an API and learn about a specific, connects or connected business that is not necessarily core to what they do. So Twitter did that a lot, right? They opened an API at some point, and a lot of a big ecosystem just came out of nowhere, and a lot of very smart things were built on top of Twitter, or Facebook for that matter. And what they do after, they just select one of the companies, they just buy it and just kill all the other ones, and it's a nice way to just expand really quickly by letting somebody else tackle the problem.
Yeah, and so I mean that brings up a good question, Stefano, which is is there a risk for anybody as Airbnb is opening up their API a little bit more, and they just announced beyond those 4 we first talked about. I think they've unofficially announced, or it's become known, that there's another 8 or so. I forget what the count is added to that. And as you alluded to it, Alex, that HomeAway now kind of is starting a partnership directory as well as an API. For people who are in the ecosystem, what are the one, what are the benefits to integrating, and 2, what are the risks?
Integrating with
HomeAway or with Airbnb, because you mentioned like with Twitter,
right.
You had, what was it, like some of the ones that allowed you to get photos into your tweets, and then they're like, this is interesting, we learn all this stuff, then we'll just do it ourselves.
I mean, I worked in social media for a while, and one of the big risks is when you integrate only with one of the big guys, so you build a business on a dependency that is really risky.
Yeah.
So I previously worked for a company called Post Planner, and we were really dependent on Facebook. And when there were issues with Facebook for some reason, sometimes they change the API or they change the policies. The whole business is at risk, right? So it's important to diversify the platforms. Yeah. So I think it's the same for property management systems and even property managers to just look at different potential platforms to list to.
Right.
So you just mitigate your risk. I mean, we saw that with recently with the problem with HomeAway, right, and VRBO, that after the acquisition by Expedia, all of a sudden they raised their fees, and a lot of people didn't go out of business, but a lot of people got hurt by the increase in fees.
Right.
So diversifying is becoming key, and there's a lot of players out there to help property management companies diversify right now.
Yep.
So I think it's strategically important to not put all your eggs in the same basket.
Right, yeah, and then it's kind of interesting, almost by opening up their APIs, a lot of the listing sites make it a bit easier. Airbnb probably did it because they saw this whole segment that was closed to them before, which are these traditional property managers. Because a property manager who might have hundreds of listings isn't going to manually update everything on Airbnb, right? I think probably similarly with integration with a cleaning app like yours, Alex, it's great. Like you can, notice that you got a reservation on Airbnb and then go into the app and, enter that reservation and call it. But to have all this seamlessly work, much more important. And kind of having that interconnectivity lets the whole ecosystem thrive, right? Airbnb benefits, it becomes easier to use. They get inventory where they didn't have it before. People using something like Orbirental, which again, this property management system could be your central system, and then you can connect to all kinds of services like Properly Maybe Soon, but also like your Igloo, Internet of Things, home automation system, obviously beyond pricing, all these sorts of things. But like you can play this role where people who maybe were Airbnb centric before can also easily and seamlessly get that inventory on multiple channels to diversify their risk.
Absolutely, and I think that's the role we're trying to play. But the problem we're having right now is that Airbnb has opened some APIs. First of all, they haven't opened the APIs to everybody.
Right.
So they haven't opened the APIs to us first. So that's one of our problems. The second problem is that because they have a controlled messaging system, meaning that they really control the communication between the host and the guest.
Right.
A lot of larger agencies that have that want to control the flow of communication flow have a hard time using Airbnb because of the difficulty in getting into the communication flow.
Right.
From a property management company standpoint, when you have a large team of people, this problem hasn't been solved, and I don't see how it's going to be solved because they want to control the communication until the booking is done.
Yeah.
So that's one of the problems that is going to be still very complex to to solve, and also given the fact that more and more of these large players are going in the paper booking system.
Right. Yeah, unwrap that a bit for kind of our listeners, right? So I have one property. I'm on 3 channels: HomeAway, FlipKey, and Airbnb, right? And I just get emails, and so all my communication is handled via their kind of email system, right? Because that's, as an individual, that's the easiest way to do it. Instead of logging in the app, just reply to the email, and the messaging is done, and then you just kind of have to log in to hit accept, more or less. And now for a property manager, that probably becomes a bit cumbersome. But like, how do most property managers deal with that right now in terms of the communicating with guests? Because that's something that's unique versus hotels, right? Hotels, it's kind of, you just book it. Or, if you're on booking.com and your hotel, like, they know the Hilton in San Francisco. If they actually have a question, they can just pick up the phone and call the Hilton. That's completely hidden on most channels because they don't want them to go around it, right? But how do property managers deal with that communication right now, and how, what could the listing sites do to make that more automatic? And are there APIs that could open? Like, how would you solve that?
Well, it's a very complex problem to solve because they don't want to give away the communication until the booking is done. Otherwise, a lot of people are going to start bypassing them and pay somewhere else. Right. So how do they do it? A lot of large property management companies seem to not even want to be on Airbnb at this point because so in the easiest case they have a login to the account for the account they manage, but in a lot of cases they don't even have access to the account, right? They just manage an account. They manage a property. They don't have access to the account. They get notified when there is by the owner when there is a booking request. Right. But a lot of time they don't even have access to the account. Same thing with the VRBO, So I'm not sure how they're going to solve this. I know it's a big headache for property management systems like ours, right? To be able to streamline the whole communication flow across the different channels. Right. Yeah, it's really a challenge.
I mean, is it something? I don't know how. So you have an idea too, but is it something that can be solved via like you guys are more a better history in tech than I do, but like having a simple messaging protocol between it, and there can still be a filter that blocks out emails or phone numbers, right? Like they already do right now. Alex, did you have?
I think there's a couple of solutions. There's, like, to Stefan's earlier point, I saw that Airbnb just recently started releasing a new feature called additional hosts. And I think that feature that's not how they talk about it, but I would assume that that's very much aimed at property managers. Right. Because essentially allows a property manager to have one account that then manages a whole series of other accounts.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen this, I'm actually not on the beta, but team members are, maybe both of you are, I don't know. For those that don't know, Airbnb typically tests a lot of features and they roll them out slowly. So usually, I don't know what the percentage is, but a certain percentage of people get this and then it comes later. And so Airbnb rolled out this thing, I think it's on your listing page on the left-hand column where it says add like additional hosts, which means that somebody else with an Airbnb account can log in and manage pretty much everything, I think, except for changing your payouts, right? You can't suddenly say, hey, pay out to my bank account. And they've always had security guard, put in place there by emailing you anytime there's changes. But I think you're right, Alex, right? This is sort of this thing where, for property managers, they can now manage those individual accounts And what's neat about that is you can still keep that Airbnb owner focused
Look and feel.
Versus, property management, big property management co, and they're like logo there, which is very different.
For the guest, it looks like they're booking with Emily and Jane, and it's cousin Bob who does the communication.
Right.
So cousin Bob, of course, is the property manager.
Right. And we've seen this in a lot of the urban areas now, especially when there's been crackdowns there, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the podcast. But the media has just gone and done a scrape of Airbnb and see who has the most listings in a lot of these urban cities, and so they think that they portray it as, it's this like person buying up all these properties, taking them off the market, and like look at this big hotel operator with 50 properties. The reality is it's Bob and Sue, it's Jim and Jane, it's 50 different individuals. They just have somebody else helping them out with it, right? It's a slight level higher than like having a cleaner. It's a cleaner who also responds to inquiries, right?
And that's exactly right.
And so this will help them have that. They actually launched this, so it was interesting, which we didn't rate, which would have been a good episode, was when they launched the Sonoma Select, which is this kind of very interesting thing. If you search, I think still right now in Sonoma on Airbnb, you'll see that there are these select properties where you get like kind of a gift basket, and they've sort of curated it to 100 properties. But what you see is it's actually the host that's helping for all of those individuals is Airbnb itself. Airbnb was the original assisting host. And from what I hear, there was this good article about this, that they're kind of managing some of those reservations. But in terms of communication flow, I mean, why not just have an API for that? Like if I get because right now some folks have done this via email, right, where you change the email to a certain one, and then you kind of parse the email and you can reply to the email, and so that can all be in your property management system. What's the problem with that solution? Does that work?
Well, if you start to parse emails, the problem is that we started to do this actually, and we kind of gave up on the approach, because it's every time some email format changes, you have to recode a lot of things.
Right.
So it's possible to run the business like this, but if you're a small team like we are, it's a bit hard to keep up, especially if you want to scale to different platforms. So
and that's why you have APIs, right?
Right.
Like everyone talks about APIs. What does it mean? It's just like a programmable interface. It means something that's documented that tells you how to interact with the website. You can do all these sorts of things through bots and whatever. It's just a lot of engineering work, and things change a lot. And for the sites themselves, like they want to control the flow of, so that you're not hitting their servers, millions of times. It's a bit technical, but that just slows down their systems. They want to be able to control that, and that's why you have an API. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But we've seen, I think, was it Booking.com or somebody on the hotel side started to release sort of like ways for people looking at hotels to actually chat directly with the hotel themselves in the interface. Is it the Airbnbs and HomeAways and whatnot are just too afraid that their booking flow is not good enough, that people won't still choose to book there? Because presumably, you're on Booking.com and you're looking at the Hilton, you could just go over to Hilton.com and book it there. Why don't people do that? And why isn't Booking.com so afraid of, actually letting someone communicate with the hotel and have the hotel information right there?
Well, because people are pretty, understand that as the more intermediaries there are, the more they're going to pay in fees, So
Right.
when you see the kind of fees that Booking.com charges,
Right.
I mean, it's it's not in their interest to actually let people bypass them, because if as soon as you find out how many fees you're actually paying on these sites,
Right.
and next time around you don't want to go through this site to book.
Yeah, I mean, is it that vacation rentals tradition? Now everyone's moving to the Airbnb model where there's guest fees, right? It's not like Expedia and Booking.com where there are no guest fees. They pass all the fees on to the owners or the property managers. And so, your incentive when you're on Booking.com, if you're to go over to Hilton.com, it's the same price.
Right.
And by the way, Booking.com is way better. You already have your information saved there. It's like Amazon. You can almost one click buy it. So you just buy it on Booking.com because it's simpler, right? If that existed in vacation rentals and Airbnbs, like if there existed the ability to just go direct, what do you think would change? Do you think let's say there's tripping.com, right? Tripping is the kind of meta search site, and there's a bunch of European ones now that raise some money. If they actually get good at matching, Orbirental has a listing site where people can book directly, right? If you have anything there. And you have a partnership with tripping.com. So your inventory will be on Tripping. If they get better at it and can show that listing on HomeAway and Airbnb and on the Orbirental, which is really kind of a more or less a direct booking site, fees are much less than they would ever be if you booked in one of these sites. Do you think that'll change as soon as everyone starts going to Tripping, looking for things and can see the same property in 3 different portals? How do you think that changes fees? How do you think that changes the industry?
I think it depends what market segment we're in. I think you'll see some very different things happening, particularly as far as Airbnb is concerned, in home sharing versus in vacation rentals. I think there's those platforms that have traditionally worked very closely with property managers, like HomeAway VRBO would be a good example, and Booking.com obviously would be a good example. And they're used to a multi-platform world. I think Airbnb is much more a brand and an experience that wants to sort of be an end-to-end experience and wants to keep people inside that ecosystem and not have exclusive inventory, not be listed on multiple platforms. I mean, that's my perception from looking at the brand.
Right.
Because of that, I think that what you mentioned before, that Airbnb has done a couple of integrations with channel managers and PMS. That's something that makes a lot of sense to me to see at Airbnb in the vacation rental space, where Airbnb is relatively small.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect to see that in the urban market, where Airbnb is in many markets dominant now. So
right.
I think there's going to be very different approaches on whether you let people communicate directly with the owner and it's just one channel,
right?
Which is, I think, what I'd expect to happen in the urban market,
right?
But it's going to be all inside Airbnb versus some of the other platforms that I think they will have to figure out how to deal with multiple distribution channels, like with release windows, first HomeAway VRBO, then Airbnb, then Booking.com last, and sort of all of that, and then you have to have consolidated solutions that basically allow users to get straight through to the owner of the inventory.
The owner, right? Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. We always make the comparison between eBay and Airbnb, which is eBay started out as everyone selling Beanie Babies, right? Everyone's mom and dad or whoever selling Beanie Babies, selling your old comic books and whatnot. And so when that's your user type, then it makes a lot of sense for it to all be there. You got your payment integration there. You have one way to pay, it's PayPal. It's not, they have other ones now, but they could even have price recommendations in there. And if you're selling, 5 comic books a year, that kind of works and it's nice and it's all controlled. But then the market, that's not scalable for, people aren't doing that enough. And really it ends up being dominated by these power sellers that say, hey, eBay is actually a great channel to sell this stuff that I'm already selling on my own site, at my own little bespoke thing. And then Etsy comes along and I'll also list on Etsy and Amazon and whatnot. And by the way, I have my own payment processor. I use authorize.net and I want to be able to accept credit cards via that. And so we have to have a gateway. eBay seemed to move away from that and being more open. Airbnb seems to be starting to recognize that. I guess it's always a balance, right? Because they don't want to just be a funnel. But I mean, would you say Expedia, for instance, doesn't try to control that experience as much as possible? Because when you go into Expedia, they want you to log in to get special rates, right? Create an account. They have a loyalty program for booking there more often. They try to kind of make sure that you're always that go-to place for it.
Yeah, but I think the fundamental difference is that Expedia is very clear about what they are. They're a listing platform.
Right.
So the inventory that you find in Expedia obviously comes from everywhere. It could be Hilton, could be Intercontinental, could be Airbnb, could be VRBO. Well, once they get into that segment, as they have with the acquisition of HomeAway, of course. But you'll find any kind of inventory. I think Airbnb, you have a very different expectation. There's a brand around what you find, and it's positioned as unique inventory and exclusive inventory, which you shouldn't find everywhere else. I think that's where the difference is.
Right, and that's also why they don't want to be listed on some of the meta search engine sites.
Precisely.
They want to control the whole flow.
Yeah, that's interesting. Which is always, you guys know this as startups yourselves. It's always about, first you want distribution. Right? Airbnb was all on Craigslist because Craigslist could get them broader distribution. Orbirental's on Tripping because Tripping gives them great distribution. But as soon as Orbirental maybe gets a bit bigger, they're like, let's try to create our own brand and not be as much like, I'm not alluding, I don't know anything about Orbirental, but I mean that seems to be the trend of things, right?
Yeah.
You use a platform that has distribution to get widely known, but then you still want to come back and own those customers and not be beholden to that broader distribution now. So I think everybody goes through that. We'll do one last thing sort of on this openness front and leave this for Stefan. There's this kind of Airbnb-centric world where where your your smart lock, your whatever is all linked into there. But as soon as, if you had somebody, let's face it, if you had somebody who just is like, you know what, I'm worried about Airbnb, I don't want to be instant book, they only show instant books at the top of the results, I want to be on HomeAway as well, just to hedge against that, because maybe they'll change their algorithm. Probably have the same number of people who have been on VRBO forever. Suddenly this new best match thing came up, and it's like Google Panda, and it just throws some people to the bottom for no particular reason, other people shoot to the top. You suddenly realize that you're at the whim of some sorting algorithm, and that you kind of need a hedge to be on two sites. If you're suddenly in the space where you're on two sites, you're on Airbnb, you're on HomeAway, how do you manage that, and what does that look like? Does this kind of integration between these ecosystem players directly into Airbnb and directly into HomeAway become sort of irrelevant, and really where you want to be integrated is an essential platform like Orbirental? Or because so if somebody was in, let's play this out with you guys. Someone had their listing on Orbirental, and it was synced to HomeAway and synced to Airbnb, and they get a reservation and they want to send a key code out, right? Right now, presumably you would get, if you had one August lock and it was linked, you'd have to link it to Airbnb and link it to HomeAway.
Not necessarily.
Does that
So I mean, the way it works for us is we have integration with some lock companies already, either Home or Resort Lock.
Yeah.
So basically, you can, because once the Airbnb is always a special case because the booking happens there, but once the booking happens on Airbnb, you can usually get the email address of the guest, and you can then manage the sending check-in instructions and lock-in codes from your PMS, right?
Right.
So you can do this, regardless of where the booking came from. Once you get a hold of the guest contact information, you can start managing the process, the booking process, the check-in process, checkout process from the PMS.
Yeah.
So I think that's not really an issue.
Yeah.
You don't have to. So in our case, for example, we have a direct integration with some of these lock companies. So you don't really have to connect the lock to the Airbnb account. You can just connect it to the PMS.
Right. Yeah. I'll leave this last one for both of you guys. Like, what, when we talk about this open world, what do you think is most closed right now, and what should the whole industry be looking to create standards on and open up? Like, what are one or two things that you think are really creating roadblocks to sort of innovation in the industry because where information really can't move, or if we did open this up and things communicate better, you would just improve efficiency and improve kind of the whole industry. Start with Alex.
I'll turn it around to you.
Okay. That's a great thing.
I actually know the way I'm going to turn it around to you is the area that I think is one of the most interesting areas is dynamic pricing. And one of the things that I think is really sad is that beyond pricing is not in host assist. And I think if
I didn't pay him to say this.
No, it's actually and it's interesting because I've been following a couple of threads of hosts debating this, where they talk about smart pricing. That's Airbnb's version, which works for some people, doesn't work for other people. And I think if sort of a company that's truly innovative, I think what they would do is to say, hey, we've got a huge built-in advantage to market our own product to our user base, because we can integrate it into our app, we can push it any way we want to. So why not let 3 or 4 alternative solutions beyond pricing pricing, Everbooked, price method, sit in host assist and, sort of let everybody figure out what works for them.
Yeah.
And you guys have to charge for it because you're running a business. They don't have to charge for it. So there's like two massively built-in advantages for them anyway. So I think unless you want to become Microsoft, sort of, where you become the monopolistic sort of party that just deals off of the fact that you own the user base and everybody's wedded to Microsoft Office, and you're gonna milk that for the rest of history. I think the smart way to stay innovative is to open up the ecosystem as much as possible, and invite everyone else in, because it also keeps young guys up on their toes, because they gotta make sure that their products can compete with the best and not just sort of be internally pushed.
Yeah,
so I think I'd love a world like that, and I think it would be good for Airbnb, it would be good for Booking.com, it would be good for HomeAway, because it create more internal competition.
Yeah, and it's a good point, right? It exists in enterprise software, right? Where Oracle will have their core database, but it talks with a marketing automation thing, and then they might have their own marketing automation thing, right? And it's sort of the same with, Orbirental now is focused on the core property management system and the agency stuff, but it's like, we're integrated with you guys, but like if you decide to also sell this, down there, but you also integrate with us, you give people choice.
Right.
You have the advantage because this is existing customers that you're selling down, and that's generally how enterprise works. You want to be able to work with everything, but if you decide, hey, we want this too because we can cross-sell it, or, we would rather do that than do a rev share with somebody else, then it just means like everything's able to compete and everything doesn't live in silos, right? And I think you're right. That's where innovation kind of dies.
Yeah.
We sort of see this where we're like, we don't want to spend our time trying to hack, integrations into all these places, because what we do is we help people optimize their prices. It's like you want to work on creating this network of cleaners and creating an app that makes it seamless for people to get their cleaning done. You would rather spend 99% of your time on that and 1% on your time on dealing with the connectivity issues.
That's exactly
right.
Mm-hmm.
But if it gets flipped and you're having to, and you see this part of the Orbirental, I feel like if I have to build out this thing to manage like emails coming in and hack all of that, and that takes up half of your time, you'd rather build the best core system that you can and then have everything else just seamlessly work via API.
Yeah, APIs are contracts, right? It's like signing a contract with another entity, and so it's really clear what you do, and you mitigate the risks. When we start hacking a system to get into the communication flow and everything, it's taking a lot of risk, because so we see just to rebound on what you were saying about the openness and of APIs and everything. There's the competition aspect that is interesting, but there's also dealing with the flow that people already have and the connectivity they already have with specific companies. We see this with payment systems. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different use cases. So we have an integration with one payment system, but it doesn't work for a lot of people. So a lot of companies already work with another payment system for different reasons. Right. So some of them are with vacation rent payments, right? For different reasons. Because the fees are better in the US, some of them are only available in Japan or in other countries. So that's also the benefit of having an open system, is that you can allow people to to not give up the flow that they like, and something works well for their business with a specific software, some specific software. So it's nice to allow them to just keep this working. Same thing for accounting. People work with QuickBooks, other with Xero. So having a way for them to choose between different accounting systems to connect to the platform is also really interesting.
Yeah,
so they don't have to switch.
Right, and it helps your system too, where it's like, hey, we have this amazing system and we'd like to work with it. Oh, but we're on QuickBooks. We're not going to switch to Xero just to work with Orbirental, right? Yeah. And you always have that problem where people are like, have one thing that they can't switch off to this high switching costs. Yes. And so if you can't talk to that, then it's a deal breaker. Right, exactly. And we run into that all the time. Like, we'll have people who will say, hey, I'm on this property management system. Can you work with that? And we'll say, no, like it's not open. It's not open, and we can't, and talk to them about it being open. And, and then they're kind of pigeonholed and they have to choose, right? Anyway, well, that's great. That's a great discussion. Hopefully for all the listeners, that's a crash course in kind of the open ecosystem and everything that's going on there. Well, I know one thing that's a little bit off topic that I wanted to address a little bit. we're here in San Francisco, but this is starting to come up a bit in cities sort of around the country where laws are being passed. Initially, there were laws that were restricting short-term rentals, and kind of the resolution, largely led by Airbnb, was to kind of regulate the industry, have people get vacation rental permits. And this is very typical in like beach and ski destinations. I have a vacation rental permit for my place in Santa Cruz, and now they're introducing it to these urban markets. And typically, the planning department would then be tasked with making sure that everyone that rents a place is abiding by the rules. And that's typically how enforcement works. If I park my car out on the street, it's up to SFMTA to come and give me a ticket if I'm parked there, past when the meter's due. It's not up to Toyota, right? Is that a fair analogy to say that the new moves by these cities to get Airbnb to turn in people or to report people or to not list people that don't have a permit on their site, is that valid? Is it like, should OpenTable, right, which is a restaurant booking site, require to see the health certificates of every restaurant on its site or their business permit? Where does that responsibility lie? San Francisco just passed. Do either of you know more of the details of the San Francisco House? Can you explain that a little bit?
Unfortunately, sort of as an Airbnb host in San Francisco,
Sure.
I've been in the trenches of the battle.
Right.
But it hasn't gone so well.
Right. The new law basically said, it wasn't a new law, it was a supervisor resolution.
Like the Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance that basically now compels the listing platforms to also be responsible for only listing people who comply with the current short-term rental ordinance.
Yeah.
I think it's basically passed because it got a 10-0 majority, which means the mayor can't veto it, and if he did veto it, it couldn't be overridden. The veto would be overridden.
Right.
So I think the way it looks like it's going to come into force in July. I think the rumbling is that Airbnb only has one option. No, it's actually not just Airbnb, it's all listing platforms, which is to sue. And they would sue on the grounds of what you mentioned, which is that as a platform, they're not responsible for regulating conduct on that platform.
Right.
I think there's a lot of that makes sense in that argument. Yeah. There's sort of the flip side of that. I think Airbnb has had a couple of challenges recently with people who are quite openly acting racistly, or like as racists on the platform. And so you'd wonder how those two things have anything to do with each other. But basically what's happening is that I think in a number of cases, Airbnb has started to come in very heavily to say, we will regulate what's happening on our platform.
Right.
And I think people expect them to do that.
Right.
So at that point, where do you draw the line?
Right. It's hard to say,
we'll kick you can't have it both ways.
But we won't kick off
exactly.
people who have illegal places.
Yeah. So the moment you go in and say, I'm going to start regulating conduct in my community, and I will start paying attention of who does what and who interacts with whom in what way and who But it's a slippery slope.
It's like if you're on Facebook and you kick off, people that post racial epithets, are you then responsible for people who list stolen goods on it?
I think where one of the main differences also is that I think, from what I understand, the platform can be fined $1,000 per day for listing, an illegal unit. So that's kind of it's a difference between just regulating and kicking out people and actually being fined.
Right.
So that's it's a very much heavier price to pay.
So Orbirental.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a listing site?
Well, yeah.
Do you fall into this? Is this by the law with that?
So we've been thinking about.
You're not Airbnb size, so you don't have the resources. We cannot pay
$1,000 a day right now. This is something we're taking seriously, and it's a bit of a concern because we don't have the resources to monitor activity on our site. So
presumably, they're really not going to go enforce on tripping. They're at a search site. Do they count? They have stuff advertised there but it's all inventory from another listing site. It's Meta. Do they fall under this?
That's the point.
There's so many different levels of it, right? It'll be interesting to see how it resolves. It seems like cities trying to not have to do the work themselves.
Yeah,
And I mean, is that? Do you think that's the impetus behind it? Like they are like, oh, it'd be so much easier to just make them give us. It's just like saying the U.S. government saying, hey, it'd be so much easier if you just let us read all your emails on Gmail than us having to hack in behind there and figure out what you're saying. So let's do that instead.
No, I think you're right.
Is that totally unfair?
It's a slippery slope, and the moment you start putting the burden on regulating all kinds of things onto the platforms, like you're opening a Pandora's box for the whole internet, that's going to be really tricky. I think it's going to be very important for the platforms to think this through all the way, because they are doing a number of things that are putting them into both directions. Like the example I used before is a little bit far-fetched. Airbnb is also doing a number of tax deals with, I think, 190 cities now. Right. And I understand the strategy. It makes a lot of sense. But the moment you start saying, I'm going to start collecting taxes on your behalf,
right.
Again, you sort of, like, it feels like you're crossing a line where, how can you have it always? So I think they're doing the right thing by putting up a very, very principled resistance against that kind of enforcement. But I think sort of you have to think about all the different pieces, and all the different pieces have to fit together.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think there's a lot of, history. There's a lot of platforms already out there that have the same kind of problems like we said, Twitter and Facebook. You're not. Facebook is not responsible. They're not going to be fined when somebody is posting racist comments or something like this. But they are responsible for removing the comments if they are ordered to by law. Right. So I think it's a similar thing. That will happen with the platforms like Airbnb. I don't think they should be responsible, but they should be able to remove the listings if they are required to.
Yeah, for those, obviously there's the larger debate about, what role should short-term rentals play and all the zoning and all this other sort of stuff. One thing though, as a permitted vacation rental in Santa Cruz, and we see this on the pricing front, when you're trying to run a business and then everyone else kind of pops up and is running the same business without going through all the steps you need to take through, it creates a lot of competition. When regulation steps in from a very selfish perspective, suddenly the number of listings falls in half. Guess what? Your rates are going to be able to go up.
And in San Francisco, it would fall by 80% or something like that. So I talked to a number of hosts that are saying, well, we're not demonstrating in front of City Hall this time because
it's good for you. And people actually ask us too on the pricing front. They say, hey, why don't you send out an alert when there's surge, right? Because it's like, tell everyone that it's the Super Bowl. Or tell everyone, they don't say that, everyone knows it's Super Bowl, but tell everyone when it's Dreamforce and they can list their place and make a lot of money. Problem is, when everybody lists their place, suddenly there's a ton more supply and we can't charge as much. We see this with these Uber drivers at New Year's Eve where they're told, everyone come to San Francisco, it's going to be 8x surge, and then they all come to San Francisco. And because they all came to San Francisco, surge is only 1.5x.
I think you presented a great example with the Pope coming to Philadelphia.
Yeah,
I think you showed a couple of times where everybody expected that there would be huge surge pricing for accommodation, and then there wasn't, because there was just as much of a surge in supply as there was a surge in demand.
Right, exactly. So I guess the slightly selfish outcome of if this all does happen is that all those that are fully permitted and regulated are going to see a boom for it. But I don't think you'll see them petitioning for that outside City Hall. I think most folks are supportive of the industry as a whole. So.
Yeah, no, and I think, as hosts, we have to look around the corner. Because sort of this might feel like an easy one for us to duck off, but exactly. Sooner or later they'll come for all of us. So it's in our interest to continue to. And I think there's a thing to say about Airbnb that people don't enough notice is they've pretty much fought that battle by themselves. So they've been running, sort of the battle for everyone, and everybody else was, sort of, you go guys, and you pay for it. So there's something to be said for that.
Well, let's end on this point here and discuss this. Part of that reason because they had a different model than HomeAway, where HomeAway was traditionally a listing site in the terms of like the Yellow Pages are. And they were not actually doing the transaction. And Airbnb was more exposed because they were the merchant of record. They were the one doing the transaction, not the individual owners. Do you think that's why? Or do you think it's because they have the resources and they're the ones fighting? Like, why isn't, HomeAway does have a team and that's out there, but you don't hear like someone in the media, are they expending the same resources, or do they just see Airbnb's going to fight it, so why do we need to?
Well, I think it's what you said. Like, so HomeAway has a team, but I think that's Matt Curtis and 2 guys.
Right.
Like, it's compared to dozens and dozens of people around the world at Airbnb and a very, very different budget.
Yeah. Or is it also, is it because of where the majority of HomeAway's listings are versus where the majority of Airbnbs are?
That's what I was going to say. I think the fact that Airbnb is more urban is really creating a real problem in cities where, like in San Francisco, everything started here,
Right.
as always. There's a less inventory for people to live here.
Right.
So that creates a real problem as the prices go up and there's less and less inventory as people are renting their places.
Yeah.
I think that's why they are more a target for more scrutiny.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We looked at this, we actually just in CNBC talking about where the majority of Airbnb's listings are. One nice stat of it was only 16% are in the US. So most of their business comes from international.
Oh, yeah.
But the other thing that was interesting was, and the majority of them are urban markets. When you look at HomeAway, like their biggest markets, like Pensacola, Florida, right? 15,000 listings or something there, and Airbnb has, 1,000 or something in that same market. And so they just have they don't have as much overlap in these, even though that's changing.
But the sort of the regulatory backlash is happening in vacation rental markets too, and that's Matt Curtis has been going around telling that to everyone that sort of don't think we are immune on the VR side of things. It started in the cities, but it's bleeding into vacation rental markets now.
It's really interesting to see that, right? It's like so we were interviewed too by a newspaper in Daytona about is Airbnb taking over Daytona Beach? And I was like, Daytona Beach, it's all vacation rentals there already. There's thousands of ones on HomeAway. They've been there for a decade, and you're worried about Airbnb? Like, holy moly! Like this is it's like going up to Tahoe and everybody being like, oh, there's a vacation rental problem. Like there's a ski lease problem. Like that's the whole business here.
Exactly.
It's like San Francisco being like, hold on, we need to get rid of all these hotels downtown. It's kind of been the standard there. So,
but one of the things that you said, I think is really interesting because you correctly pointed out that the key difference between Airbnb's business model and everyone else's is that Airbnb participates in every single transaction.
Right.
So because of that, they know the transaction, and that makes it very vulnerable for regulatory enforcement because they're part of the transaction, so they know. The other guys know some of the transactions, but not all of them. I think one of the things that's interesting is that as everyone's heavily moving in the direction of trying to participate in every transaction, be that via guest fees or via host fees, I think everybody suddenly starts being in the same boat. And that's bad for everyone in a way because I think one of the strongest arguments for Airbnb to push against the legislation was to say like, wait, this is electively is only enforceable against us. Because we're the only ones that see all the transactions, the other guys don't. So this is unfair, and I think they had a very, very good argument on that. But as everyone else is moving in the same direction, sooner or later this will be enforceable and us against the whole industry.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Awesome. Well, this has been incredible conversations. Might be our best episode ever. Really, thanks so much to both of you guys. Your expertise is incredible. Before we go, anything to plug? Alex, tell them about Properly.
It's free, available worldwide in 8 languages right now at getproperly.com.
Awesome. Definitely check it out. Stefan?
So now we have a nice brand new integration with Beyond Pricing. So things are going really well. Orbirental.com. Try to get your PMS plus pricing plus channel management.
Plus smart home, plus everything.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Fantastic episode. Definitely subscribe to us on iTunes. Check us out on Stitcher, every other possible podcast medium, and tune in next week.